personal experience as a Navy pilot. I spent 24 years in the Navy. Thank God, flew most of it, except for about 6 years and 11 months, close to 7 years, as a guest of the Hanoi Hilton. But I'll get into that. I was a young aviator off the USS Enterprise in Vietnam. I was an ensign at the time, and we took off one morning on a mission to go into try to knock out a SAM site, SAS. Because of the weather, we were diverted to another target, and this other target was a bridge, and it was down in the southern part of North Vietnam. This was my 80th mission, by the way. And I wasn't too worried about the anti-aircraft fire down in that area, etc. But anyway, I was the tail end Charlie of the flight of four, A4 Skyhawks off the Enterprise. And we rolled in on the target. As being an ensign, I was number 4 in the flight. No sooner had I rolled in than the tail of my airplane disappeared. Got blown off by anti-aircraft fire. I was carrying 6 500-pound bombs plus a pretty full load of fuel, and things happened in a hurry. Went from a dive, I was about 70 degrees, nose down. The airplane was not spinning, but it was in a steep spiral, and the airplane was on fire. We were only about 8 miles inland at the time, and my brain was thinking, I need to get this airplane turned around, get it back out of the water, punch out, and maybe somebody will pick me up, one of the good guys. Well, things weren't working out quite that well. I had my hand up on the bomb jettison handle, trying to get the nose of the airplane up enough that I could make a turn, get that back out over the water, and out of the corner of my eye, my right eye, I see the airspeed approaching 600 miles an hour. I remember taking my hand off of the bomb jettison and reaching for the ejection seat handle. At the same time, in probably 1,000th of a second, I remember saying to myself, it's too late to get out, because I was really low, 70 degrees nose down, 600 miles an hour, thereabouts. I don't remember ejecting. All I remember was reaching for the handle. The next thing I knew, I woke up about 10 feet underwater in the middle of this river, this bridge we were bombing. There's an old saying in the Navy, and I guess all the services, don't ever bail out over the place you just bombed, okay? Probably a good idea. Anyway, so I wake up, I probably had maybe a half a swing in the chute, and here I am, probably in the space of 10 seconds or a little bit more. I went from flying a Navy jet to being in the middle of North Vietnam underwater. Anyway, I went through the Navy procedures we all train at, hit my flotation gear, came up to the top of the water, got rid of my parachute, and started looking around. I took out my survival radio, it was smashed, got rid of that. That wasn't doing me any good. I was in a river, as I mentioned, about a mile wide, and I could hear the dogs barking on both shores. 7 o'clock in the morning, you can tell if you've ever been to Vietnam or any of those type of countries. They cook with charcoal. You can smell the fires burning charcoal, and the fields are spread with human waste as fertilizer, so it's got a nice aroma as well. Anyway, they put out a boat from the south side of the river, they put out a boat from the north side of the river, and the one from the south got there first. By this time, I had gotten rid of my .38. I didn't figure I was going to shoot my way out of North Vietnam with a .38. And all my ammunition, all the rest of that stuff, it was all down at the bottom of the river. The guys from the south got there first, as I mentioned, stopped about here, from here to that wall away from me. And I was in shock, I'm sure. I put my hands up and thinking, this ain't going to be good. They stopped, 6 guys in black pajamas, all carrying AK-47s. We kind of had a standoff for a few minutes, eyeball to eyeball. Guy in the front was standing up, had his leg up on the gunwale of the boat. His face was all scarred, and I thought to myself, he's been in the war somewhere. This is going to be tough. Anyway, they grabbed me, pulled me ashore. So here I am in North Vietnam. I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen. I didn't know if there were any prisoners, were they going to take me out and shoot me that afternoon, or what was going to happen. So they wired my arms behind my back, kept me there in that village for the rest of the day. During the ejection, all the muscles in my neck had been torn out. I'd lost my helmet, and et cetera, my mask. So wherever my head was at, I couldn't move it. I could just move it by my hand. No pain, but I couldn't move my neck. And my knee was swollen up about the size of a cantaloupe by that time. Anyway, they had taken my flight boots and all the rest of my equipment. And in Vietnam, North Vietnam, I should say, nothing moves during the day. Everything moves at night because of the bombings and the aircraft. So here we go. I'm barefoot, tenderfoot, with marching on a bad leg, arms wired behind my back through the night. Well, they started me moving from there to North Vietnam. And through each little village we went, they would encourage the natives, I was blindfolded of course, they encouraged the natives to beat on me with clubs and rocks and one thing and another. And every once in a while they'd stop somewhere in a village and put me up against a wall or put a pistol to my head, and you never knew, this might be it. You never knew from one moment to the next whether there was a chamber in around or not. After about 4 days of this, by the way, I think I had 2 bananas in 4 days and a couple of sips of water. We arrived in this one village, and again, as I mentioned, you don't move during the day. They had this dugout outside the village there. It was about 6 feet deep, 5 feet deep, maybe palm logs on the top and coconut logs on the top. And that's where they'd throw me during the day. Well, again, arms wired behind my back. So I'm down there in this pit, and they pull me out. And there's an old, elderly Vietnamese who spoke French. Well, I spoke a little bit of French, but I didn't want him to know that. He gave me the standard routine, name, rank, serial number, date of birth, and all that kind of stuff, which I gave him. And he just kind of shook his head. I wouldn't answer anything else beyond that. Well, he didn't seem to take too much offense to it, but the guard really did. And this guard, he ran off into the jungle, came back with a club about 2 feet long, or about 2 inches in diameter, I should say, about 6 feet long, and he was going to whale it out of me. The old man said, no, don't do that. So, unfortunately, the old man wanders off, and I figure, I am going to get it big time now. Well, he pushed me I was standing on the edge of this dugout area. He pushed me face down into it, and I landed on my face, of course, didn't have anything to stop my fall. And as I hit the ground, I hear that bolt slide back on that AK-47, and I figured, this is it, baby, this is it. He went off stomping and screaming and yelling. Obviously, he didn't kill me, but the reason I'm telling you this particular incident, this was the 4th day I was there. I thought, the Second World War lasted 4 days. I've been here, or 4 years rather. I've been here 4 days. I can last another 4 days. So that was my first goal that I set. I'll last another 4 days. And then later that became 4 weeks, and then 4 months, and then a year, and 2 years, and on and on. But I always set a goal to that point. And I never set it to the point where if something doesn't happen by then, I'll just go crazy or whatever it may be. But I did set those goals. They moved me on. I finally arrived in Hanoi a week later. And I arrived in Hanoi outside the old French prison, which is proper name Wallow, but which we gave the nickname the Hanoi Hilton. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm laying in the back of this truck. It's raining. They pull me out. I could see underneath my blindfold this old iron gate, old iron hinges. This place was probably 100 and some years old by that time. Anyway, they take me in, throw me in what we called the green room. Well, the green room was the torture room. I spent a week there, basically no food, very little water, getting the hell beat out of me on a daily basis. And finally, it got down to the point where they used a Vietnamese rope trick, as we called it. I don't know what they called it, but anyway, they were not very sophisticated in their torture methods. Take your arms behind your back, tie a rope around your elbows, and then try to bring your elbows up over the top of your head into your lap. Well, the body doesn't quite work that way. Your shoulders separate first, which is what happened to me. From there, I figured, yeah, I still didn't know I might be the only guy still alive in North Vietnam. I hadn't seen anybody, heard of anybody, didn't know of anything. They took me out of there, threw me into what we later called the Heartbreak Hotel. Well, that's a very fancy name for a place that was just a concrete center corridor with about 4 to 6 steel-doored cells on each side. The doors were all rusty, etc. It looked like it had been built 300 years before that. They throw you in a cell. Cell is, you can reach both sides with your hands spread. It's about 7 feet long. Concrete slab on one side with a set of old rusty leg irons on one end. And I'm thinking, and there's a little speaker up on the wall. Well, I'm thinking James Bond, you know, they're listening to me and all this other shit. Well, it's not quite that sophisticated, but anyway, I'm there, the second day I'm there, I hear this, "Hey, what's your name?" I told him my name, he told me his. He was an Air Force pilot. First contact I'd had from anybody that was still alive that I knew of. Anyway, he said, "Look at the wall. Memorize what's carved in the wall." Well, what was carved in the wall was an alphabet, 5 letters across, 5 rows, so you had A through Z. And the way you used this was, if you wanted to type the letter C, you type the first row and then the third letter. You could use this, and you learned it. This was our primary, or at least our initial communications throughout the prison. What they wanted to do was to keep everybody in solitary confinement, keep everybody separated. It was against the, quote, camp regulations to communicate. Obviously, the only way we could know who was there, what was going on, what were the Vietnamese torturing people for, or interrogating people for, etc., the communications was the link to life, plus just being able to keep in touch with people, maybe boost their morale or yours. So I memorized that. From there I stayed there probably a week or so, and they moved me to the first camp I was in, again in solitary confinement, but this camp was called the zoo. Well, after about 3 months in the zoo, I was joined by another young pilot by the name of Charlie Baldock, who was in one of the sister squadrons off the Enterprise. Well, neither one of us had had anybody to talk to for 3 months. We were both young, full of piss and vinegar and one thing and another. So we did a lot of talking and scratching and laughing and one thing, which obviously were not only against the camp regulations, so to speak, it really pissed off the guards. Well, anyway, at that point in time, when the Vietnamese came to the cell door, when they opened the door, they wanted you to bow. Well, we didn't feel quite like that doing that, so we'd nod our head and give them the American salute. And they asked us, well, what does that mean? And we said, well, that's just a greeting. That's an American greeting. You know, we give that to everyone. Well, it wasn't until about 3 or 4 years later that Jane Fonda came over and told them what it really meant. And so they caught up with us and let us know they were not too happy with it. Charlie and I were there for about another 3 months in the zoo, and finally one night the cell door slammed open. They never moved anybody during the day. Everything was done at night, and there was no rhyme or reason to it. I never figured out after 7 years there and 40 years since then why they moved this guy to that cell or anything else. So anyway, they grabbed Charlie and I, take us down to the headquarters building, to the head shed as we called it, camp commander, and he reads us a riot act. He says, you guys are bad guys, etc., and we're going to send you to the bad guy camp. We said, big fucking deal, you know. Well, they load us on a bus, handcuffed, blindfolded, with about maybe 8 other guys. And we head off over hill, over dale, one thing another. And we finally arrive at this camp, which is about, I didn't know it at the time, but about 40, 50 miles outside of Hanoi. And I mean, it is out in the nowheres. We called it Briar Patch. No water, no electricity, 2 guys or maybe 1 to a very small cell, no windows, and the guards just beat the crap out of you on a daily basis, just for the hell of it. We were eating garbage. I mean, you would eat, well, maybe you wouldn't, but if you wanted to live, you would. We ate rats, we ate monkeys, chicken heads, chicken feet. If it had bugs in it, you ate the bugs too, because that was just a little extra protein, keep you going. It was just, you know, you had to eat to live, and you get down to the basics real fast. People have said, you know, well, they couldn't do it. I said, well, you wake up in the morning, you're in a prison camp in a faraway country. It's probably 120 degrees in your cell, or maybe it's freezing ass cold. You're sick, wounded maybe, you know, you're covered with dirt, you haven't had a bath for a month or 2. You know, you don't have anything except the rags you're wearing on your back. And you really got one decision for that day. That day, it's, you know, the old thing, one day at a time. I am either going to live today or maybe I'm not. And if you want to live, and we wanted to live, but we wanted to live with honor, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, you are going to eat that garbage. You're going to take that torture. You're going to take that punishment, whatever it may be, and just, you know, suck it up. Get tough. Get really tough. The old John Wayne movie, True Grit, you better have some or you're going to be dead in a real short period of time. Well, I'm going to tell you one story from the Briar Patch. The camp commander in the Briar Patch was a guy we called Frenchie. And he was a little guy, but very wiry, and he was probably in his 60s at that point in time. And he spoke decently, fairly good English. So anyway, one day I was hauled out of my cell and taken down for an interrogation. Well, what the Vietnamese at that point in time really wanted from everybody was to write these letters to the South or to back to the United States and tell them it was an illegal, immoral war and all that crap, and, you know, please, you know, please, just don't do it anymore, it's wrong. And anyway, Frenchie, this interrogation goes on, he's trying to convince me to do this, and I'm just kind of, you know, I wouldn't agree to anything. And as time goes on, I can see he's getting more and more and more pissed, which I figured when I went in there, I was going to either get, at best, I was going to get a severe beating, and at worst, probably torture. So I finally just said, I am not going to do a goddamn thing. So Frenchie gets up from his chair, walks around the desk. He had the only furniture he had. There was a desk, he had a chair, and I had this little stool about that far off the floor. And I had a guard behind me with a fixed bayonet. They like to either look at least at you level or down on you. And of course, us being considerably taller, we had to sit on these little blocks on the ground or on the floor so that we weren't taller than they were. So Frenchie gets up, takes off his watch, lays it on the desk, and he starts screaming. I was the camp commander when we had the Japanese prisoners in World War II, and I believed him. We couldn't get them to do a damn thing. He didn't use damn. We couldn't get them to do anything. Well, I'm sorry. We could get them to do anything we wanted. I was the camp commander of the French we captured during the Indochina War, and they would do anything we wanted them to do. And with that, he slapped me and knocked me off that block. He slapped me so hard he just knocked me clean off the block. And he said, you goddamn Americans, you won't do anything. We can't get you to do anything. You are the most stupid people in the world. Well, I've been called stupid a few times before, but that was the only time I was proud of it. Anyway. Anyway, Frenchie promised me I'd pay for it, and I did. Next stop, next door to the torture room, old steel French handcuffs. These things looked like they were 150 years old, rusty. They had two arms on one side and the steel part, and they would pull your arms up all the way up behind your back like this, and then they'd lock those handcuffs just about where your wrist's at. And gravity being what it is, your arms get tired, your arms go down, and those handcuffs just twist, and the steel on the handcuffs just cuts right into the meat. Well, within about 15 minutes, I was rolling on the ground, screaming and yelling, this goddamn hurt. And by the time they got me up, slapped me around a little bit, got the handcuffs off, my arms were blue-black from my elbows to my fingertips, and my fingers were curled up like this, and they stayed that way for about the next month or so. Thank God I was living with Charlie at the time, and he was able to feed me and one thing another. Anyway, Briar Patch was so bad, they finally closed it. As I said, there was no electricity, no water. About once every month or 2 months, they'd take you down to the well, let you draw 1 bucket of water, wash your face. We didn't even bother to wash our clothes. I mean, water was so precious. Just wash yourself off as best you could, had a big old beard, etc. And one other thought from Briar Patch. I had figured, after having been there for about 6 months, I figured the chances of surviving Briar Patch were about 50-50, to be honest with you. Between the sickness, guys were getting beriberi and different kinds of diseases, the torture, and just, malnutrition, etc. I figured chances of surviving Briar Patch were about 50-50. One morning, this was in October or late in the fall, starting to get cool out. The only thing we had was a steel dish that we used, and the only place to dunk it or wash it off, it was a little vat, a concrete vat outside the cell door, and you just dunked your plate in there, and that was it. Really sanitary. One morning, it's very still, cold, and as I'm looking down into this vat, I see this face looking back at me. And I looked like, honest guy, I looked like I just walked out of Dachau or Auschwitz or some other place. When I got shot down, I weighed about 175 pounds. I was in good physical condition. By this time, who knows, but I think I weighed maybe 115 pounds. I was so weak I couldn't do a single push-up or anything. The only thing I could do while I was there, as I said, the cells were, arm's width wide, and I'd walk 2 steps, turn around, 2 steps, turn around, and walk that by the hour. That's the only thing I could do. We had no newspapers, obviously, no books, nothing to read, nothing to write on. Everything was in your mind, everything you did. To pass time, I tried to remember everything I ever learned in college, high school, whatever it may be. I was worked as a carpenter, drew plans in my head for houses, wrote novels, composed poetry, whatever it may be, just to try to keep some sanity. In the long run, that was the thing that if you lost that, you were probably going to die there. We had 6 guys that didn't come back from that group up there, of what eventually turned out to be about 550 some prisoners in the North, Navy, Air Force, a few Marines. We only had 1 Army guy, and he's the only guy that managed to escape. So go Army. Hey, there he is. He was an Army Ranger, and he got out one of the outlying camps before he got into the main camp and hayakoed into the jungle, and he's the only guy that got out alive. Anyway, where was I? The situation, as I said, in Briar Patch was so bad, they moved us back. And now I'm going to jump forward a couple of years to 1969. I was shot down in spring of '66, so this is '69. and I was in a camp called the Zoo. Well, because they had gotten more and more prisoners, they had more and more need to get everybody together, or put more guys in a cell. We had an escape. Our cell block was not involved in the escape other than we were assisting them, the two guys that were going to go over the wall. By the way, going over the wall was the easy part. We could get over the wall, a little sweat, but we could get over the wall. But what are you going to do when you hit the ground on the other side? You're in the middle of a city of Hanoi, millions of people, and they're all about that tall. And they all have a different skin color than you do. You don't speak the language, you don't know shit from apple butter. And you got 250 miles to go in any direction to get out of there. So we had about 5 escapes. One guy was tortured to death. The rest of them were recaptured, and as I mentioned, the Army Ranger was the only guy to get out of North Vietnam. In later years, I was one of about 8 members of the escape committee, if you will. We did all of planning and et cetera. None of us were programmed for escape, but we all did the planning. And the only person that could approve an escape was the senior ranking officer of the camps. But anyway, so we had this escape planned. It went off on a Saturday night in a rainstorm. The guys went over the wall. Both of them were recaptured the next day. One was tortured to death and the other one survived. But they locked down the camp for the next 2 months. Nobody outside the cell. By the way, unlike Hogan's Heroes or all that other bullshit, we were locked in the cell 24/7. The only time you ever got out, depending on the conditions, was you might get out for 15 minutes once a week to dunk a bucket of water over your head. Now, as time went on, later on, we got more and more time outside, but that's the way it was at that point in time. Anyway, we had the escape. And I want to get into a lot of detail because the clock is ticking and I don't want to keep you going for too ever long. But they locked down the camp. Things got real tough. They were torturing people, trying to find out who knew what, the communications thing. Anyway, we hadn't been outside, hadn't had any water to wash ourselves for, I don't know, month and a half. Finally, the cell door slams open one day, and they come in, and they said, "Meat." That was my Vietnamese name. Why? I have no idea. "Meat, you can take a bath." I said, "Man, how about the rest of the guys?" We had 6 guys in this cell. "Nope, only you." I said, "I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. If you want to let everybody else do it, I'll do it." "Nope." Cell door slammed closed. About 15 minutes later, the cell door slams open again. "Meat." And they gave me the signal, "Put on your long sleeve shirt. That means you're going to go see the camp commander." So anyway, they traped me down to the camp commander's office. And I walk in and I know some shit's going to happen here because every officer in the camp and every guard in the camp was lined up along the walls of the camp commander's office. Down one side, along the back, along the other side. And they marched me over there in front of the camp commander, and he said, "You refuse to take a bath." And I said, "No, I don't refuse to take a bath. I'd love to take one. But you got to let the rest of the guys in my cell take a bath." "No, they may not. You may, but you refuse, so now you must be punished." Well, it was the same old game. If you ever watched any of the movies, what they were trying to do is divide and conquer, if you will. One guy does it, he gets ostracized by the rest, on and on. You know the game, you know the story. So anyway, he says, "Drop your pants and get on the floor." So I dropped my pants, spread eagle on the floor, butt side up. Anyway, I got 30 lashes with a rubber hose, and let me tell you, it hurt. I had to bite my cheek to keep from screaming, but anyway, I didn't. Anyway, they grabbed me, pulled me up, pulled my pants. I pulled my pants up, and I don't know why I said it, but it was kind of a smart-ass thing. I said, "Now that I got my fucking beating, how about let me take a bath?" "No, threw me out of there, marched me back to my cell. Life goes on. Finally, that blew over. As the years went by, after Ho Chi Minh died in 1969, up until that point, the guards could beat on you anytime they wanted to. But after that, he kind of tapered off a little bit. And finally, you know, if they wanted something, they'd torture you for it. And we made them torture. Our policy in the camp was you never give them a damn thing. If they want it, make them torture you for it. And they'll know they got to, and you'll know that that's what's going to happen too. But that was our policy. But anyway, the treatment, the food didn't get any better, but the guards weren't allowed to beat on you every day. Now, if they took you to the headquarters for an interrogation or whatever, then, you know, it's fair game. The time went on, and I go back a little bit, as I mentioned, you get tough. You have to get tough. Now I'm talking 1969, and by the way, 1969, for you historians or whatever, the United States stopped bombing North Vietnam. At that point in time, just before they stopped doing that, the guards were in, the North Vietnamese army was in such bad shape, they were stealing our garbage to eat. Their uniforms were in tatters, and, you know, they were just bad off. Well, whoever made the decision to take a bombing stop for 2 years, let them get back on their feet again, and I don't know. I don't try to delve into the politics of it too much. I'd probably get so pissed off I wouldn't be able to handle it anyway. But time went on. As time went on, they moved more and more people together. You know, you get tough, you get used to it. I'm still setting those goals out there. I was there 5 years before I was listed as missing in action. My parents didn't know I was alive. One of the reasons was I never met anybody like Jane Fonda or some of the other correspondents who happened to go there, and if you were interviewed by them, then your name was out or something. So thank God I didn't have to do that. Some people did, and you've probably read some of the stories of Jane Fonda and her treasonous behavior, etc. So, you know all about that. I've talked about the typical day, the heat, sickness, disease. If you needed medical care, you were just shit out of luck. That's all there was to it. You know, if you had serious medical problems, only in a few cases where did they do surgery and potentially save somebody's life. But if you just had a broken arm, or you'd gotten shot or something like that, it either healed or it didn't, one or the other. Some guys walking around with pieces of their arms missing. A piece of bone out of your arm was gone, so whatever it might be. But as I mentioned, people got tough. We became very inventive during that period of time, too. We could steal anything that wasn't nailed down. There's still stuff buried in the walls of the Hanoi Hilton that we stole. One guy stole a damn 6-foot-long steel bar. I don't know how the hell he managed to get away with it, but anyway, we carved a place to hide it in the wall, dug out the wall, put it in there, mixed up plaster or brick, etc., replastered the damn thing, and as far as I know, it's still there, unless they found it somewhere. But anyway, we managed to make playing cards for ourselves, on and on. The main thing, as I mentioned again, was trying to keep everybody's spirits up. It was a fantastic group of people. I have been, fortunately, in my later career in the military as well, in some of the finest squadrons in the Navy at that point in time. But the group of guys that I was with in Hanoi were by far the most selfless. They would do anything for anybody as a prisoner of war. They were honest, they were strong, they were patriotic. I mean, I just can't say enough about it. They'd do anything for you. And tell you just a few instances of which I personally was involved. I was in a cell one time with 4 guys, and we had actually it was a Navy backseat F4, what we called a RIO, radar intercept officer. How the hell he ever got in the Navy or got into flying, I don't know, because he had asthma. And here he is in a prison camp with frickin' asthma in the jungle. And he would get these asthma attacks, and the other 3 of us would have to sit up all night long with him or all day long with him and give him CPR by the hour. We'd just trade off and trade off and trade off. I mean, he survived, and he's still living today, but God almighty. We had guys with severe injuries as far as their backs, with sciatic nerve damage, etc. We'd sit up and try to give them a little bit of pain relief, massage their legs or their backs or whatever it may be to just try to help them a little bit, or guys that couldn't breathe. It was just something that you didn't think about, whether you're going to do it or not. It was just something you did because you know that he would do it for you. Guys took torture for other people. Rather than rat on somebody and take the easy way out, guys would get tortured. They would keep their mouth shut, whatever it may be that was going on at that particular point in time. And I'll tell you just an incident to show you how people can be. Now, I understand that in any situation, people, they either show their best or their worst. Fortunately, we didn't have any of the worst. I had been there probably close to 6 years by this point in time, and I was in a cell in the zoo, or actually back in Wallow, the main French prison, and we had 2 guys that had been there at least as long as I had, and they gave up. They just said, I don't want to live anymore. And they quit eating. They refused to eat. And this went on for a while. I mean, we're all skin and bones to start with, and these guys won't eat. So a bunch of us young whippersnappers got together and we said, we're not going to let those fuckers die. So the food would come, food if you want to call it that, garbage, but they refused to eat. We'd put them down on the ground. 6 guys, got 4 of them sitting on them, and 1 putting the food in their mouth. And they'd throw it up, and we'd gather it up by our hands, put it back in their mouth again, throw it up again, back in your mouth, throw it up again. You're going to eat it sooner or later, so you might as well eat it right now. Those 2 guys are still walking around today. And I don't take credit for all that, but I was part of the group that did. Anyway, moving on. A lot of good guys, a lot of tough guys. As I mentioned, you either get tough, you make a decision to live, or you don't make it. As time went on, toward the end of my time there, at some points in time, we were very disappointed in the way things were going, or very disheartened, but you always set that goal out there. Toward the end, late 1972, December 1972, they resumed the bombing. The B-52s started coming in and bombing the Hanoi area. Up until that point in time, the bombings were on again, off again, on again, off again. That's another story. But when the B-52s started rolling in, and they would come in at night, usually start about 11 o'clock at night or midnight, and it'd be just one right after another. Boom, 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 and they'd go on for hours. And I was laying on a concrete floor, on a concrete slab, and you could feel that slab moving up and down just like you were laying in the bottom of a boat. And the interesting thing was the next morning, you'd see the guards come in. Well, so many people have been killed in Vietnam, north and south, that unless it happened to me, my family, my village, whatever, screw it. Just fewer mouths to feed. But when they had come in on their little bicycles and rolled in there, and their eyes are about the size of silver dollars, they had finally gotten the picture of what can happen and will happen. Well, January comes, late January, and one of the guards comes up one day and does a little sign language on his hands. They weren't allowed to speak to us in English. There were a few of them that could speak English, but they told us there was one guy he said he had been a taxi driver in Saigon. For all I know, he might have been, but he spoke English. Most of them didn't say a word. We weren't allowed to learn Vietnamese. I learned a few words. The trouble with Vietnamese is one word, or one syllable might mean 6 different things, and if you say the wrong thing, it could mean anything from shit to apple butter, you know, you never knew. But anyway, he says Lee Doc-To, who was their foreign minister, and Kissinger, Paris. So we kind of, you know, you always took everything with a grain of salt. You never knew what was true or not. We didn't listen to camp radio. We had a gal we called Hanoi Hannah, kind of like Tokyo Rose of the World War II time. We always had one guy, that was his job. He listened to the radio. You probably 99.9999% of it was bullshit. Maybe there might be one kernel of something you could get an idea what was going on. Anyway, a couple of days later, they take us all out in the courtyard. Well, at this point in time, we were all in Wallow, the main French prison, Hanoi Hilton. We had been spread out all over the country prior to the failed attempted hostage rescue at Sante a couple of years before that. So they got us all out in the courtyard, and by requirements of the agreement, they had to read it to us, which they did. Well, we had all agreed. We had a fantastic communication system. As I mentioned, we couldn't write anything down, didn't want to in case they found out. But we had, besides the tap code, which I already mentioned, we had all kinds of hand codes, finger codes, wrote scrap letters, notes, dropped them someplace in a common area. So our communications was, we'll stand in formation, we won't cheer, we won't do anything, we'll stand there, let them read it. When they're dismissed, we'll go back to ourselves, which is what we did. Well, they had photographers out there and all this stuff. They figured they were going to get all kinds of propaganda out of that thing. Well, it didn't work out. So, you know, so now it says we're going to go home. But when? You know, the old when. You know, it didn't say when you were going to go home. So you're ready, you're alerted, you're on top of your game, ready to go. Well, anyway, a couple of days later, a week later, whatever it was, one night the cell door slams open about midnight. In come the guards. Boxes of clothes, shoes, jackets, pants, whatever. Well, obviously we didn't get any sleep that night, as you might imagine. Next morning, they marched us out of the camp. First time I'd ever been out of the camp without a blindfold and handcuffs. Put us on some buses, took us out to the joint military civilian airport called Gielon. They parked us on the off side of the runway, or off side of the field, away from anybody. Got us off the buses, gave us a Vietnamese beer, which tastes like warm piss, but it's beer and cigarettes. So we're standing there, and all of a sudden you can hear, before you can see, but this big Air Force C-141 comes floating in and lands. I had a big, huge American flag painted on the tail. Was the first flag I'd seen in 7 years, thereabouts. And it was like, you know, surreal. It was like a dream. They finally loaded us on the buses, took us over to the other side of the field. And they got us off the buses. We're in lines of 2. And we had to go through the Vietnamese side to have them sign us off, then through the American side, Air Force. And after I'd made my grand tour through there, I'm done. This Air Force sergeant grabs me by the shoulder, and we're going out to this 141. And he said, let's get our ass out of here before they change their mind. And I said, you better be running if you're going to keep up with me. Anyway, we get on the airplane. They got the airplane loaded up with baby food and all kinds of shit. They got some flight nurses on there, etc. Anyway, we take off, and we're on our way to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. And I remember it as well as if it was this morning. I'm sitting there, you know, just kind of in a daze. I'm sitting by the window, and I see that coastline of North Vietnam disappear behind the wing. And I had a cold shiver run down my back, and I vowed, I've been that close to death probably 20 times while I've been there. I ain't never going back there again. Well, anyway, a bunch of guys did go back and have over the years, and they've been treated royally, but it ain't for me. I made myself a promise at that time, and I have not changed my mind. Just a few things I wanted to tell you. When I came back, I went through a short refresher training. Out of the 150 Navy guys thereabouts that were there were about 15 of us young guys who wanted to go back and fly off the aircraft carriers again, wanted to go back to fleet squadrons. I was one of those. Was able to pass all the physicals, et cetera, you know, went through all that Mickey Mouse, and was forced to take 3 months R&R, went back through a short jet refresher training, and within a year later I was back on a carrier, and wound up off the coast of Lebanon during the flap we had over there, and then spent a couple of tours on aircraft carriers on the Saratoga, flying the A-7 Corsair II, and then wound up on the west coast on the USS Coral Sea. We pulled out of the United States, beat our way across the Pacific just in time to get off the coast of Iran, and we loaded up all our airplanes with bombs, etc., and we were ready to go into Iran. This was the Iranian hostage situation. And we were ready to launch when the helicopters crashed in the desert in Iran in the middle of the night, and they scrubbed the whole mess, and we sit there for 120 days waiting to see who was gonna blink next. But what did I take away from my time in Vietnam? Well, anyway, I spent another 12 years flying in the Navy, and thank God I was able to fly right up to the last day I retired. All kinds of different things, mostly carrier work, test work. But, you know, what I learned personally was people are a hell of a lot stronger than they think they are. And you may not think that you would have survived, but I can guarantee you, 99 out of 100 people, once you get rid of all that fluff and all that foo-foo, you know, cars, clothes, women, jewelry, shit, all you gotta think about is moi and your honor. Our motto, and still is today, we still have a POW organization, was return, but return with honor. And while I'm on that subject, as I mentioned, the guys that I was there with, I would go anywhere with them. If I was ever in a situation, they were the kind of people that we all like to be. But what I learned personally was I was a lot stronger than I thought I was. I was obviously, if I can do that, I can do anything in my life. My confidence. I never looked back. When I left Vietnam, before I had left Vietnam, I had made a conscious decision. When I leave this frickin' place, I'm leaving all that shit behind me. I'm looking forward to the future. You know, I want to get back to carrier aviation. I want to get on with my life. I was single at the time. You know, I want to go out and meet as many girls as I possibly can, get as drunk as I can, as often as I can, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, the typical aspirations of a young combat pilot. But anyway, but it made me well aware of what's important in life. You know, having a great new car, fast airplane is good, and we all love that. But your freedom, my freedom, your freedom comes first. I have a good friend of mine, and I've adopted his saying, is I never have a bad day when the doorknob's on the inside. I live that way. I don't have bad days. Some are better than others, but I never have a bad one. But anyway, so the things that are important to me, freedom, family, friends, you guys out here. I all consider you friends, and life goes on. Be part of it. If there's any questions, see me afterwards, and I'll try to answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys.